The following are excerpts from a presentation that David Hurst might give to an organization like yours.
Well, good afternoon and thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you here to be talking about your organization, about strategy, leadership, and change. I learned fairly soon in my business career that organizations don't change when they want to, they change when they have to. And it wasn't just me and the organizations I was with. As I looked around me, I looked at companies, I looked at public sector organizations, and in every case, meaningful change only seemed to take place in times of crisis. And when I looked around to see if there were any other examples of this, I found them in nature. So today we're going to be looking at some natural systems, some natural ecologies, and we're going to be drawing the parallels between them and business organizations. I'm going to be looking at organizations as natural systems, which of course they are. What I found was that nature only changes in times of crisis. In fact, nature uses crisis to change herself. Every ecology uses something, whether it's fire or insects or disease or hurricanes, cyclones, whatever, uses crisis to change. And so we're going to be taking a closer look at that this afternoon. There are two factors that disturb natural systems. The first of them, of course, is fear of death, and we're all familiar with that. The second factor is, of course, promise of sex, and I know many of us spend our time thinking about that one. If they're large corporate elephants, of course, there is golf, which can also disturb them. Unfortunately, this afternoon, we're not going to have any time to talk about golf, and I'm not going to be talking about fear of death. And so, with your permission, I'm going to concentrate on number two, except it won't be promise of sex, it will be a creative opportunity. This afternoon, you will have a creative opportunity to look at your organization in a rather different way than you thought about it before. To look at the kinds of situation you're in, the kinds of strategies you are using, and the kind of leadership you're going to need to take you forward into a sustainable future. I'm going to be using a different framework this afternoon from any you might be familiar with. You all know about economics, dear old Adam Smith. Economics, of course, is all about competition, it's about equilibrium, it's about the economy, and it's good stuff. I don't want to knock economics. But this afternoon I'm going to be looking at the world through the lens of ecologics, the science of large systems, you might say. It deals with reciprocity. I give something to you and you give something to me. This is the glue that holds organizations together. The informal exchanges of favors. Without that, no organization could function effectively. We're going to be talking about cooperation as well as competition, because firms do compete with each other, of course, but they also cooperate in many different ways. We're going to be talking about evolution, development, progression, as well as equilibrium. And we're going to be talking about community as well as economy. I'm going to suggest that community is the soil in which entrepreneurship grows. And entrepreneurship and innovation is an important part of making our economic growth sustainable. So if economics is the science of either or, then ecologics is the science of both and, both competition and cooperation, both equilibrium and evolution, both economy and community. I now want to take you off to look at another natural system. I want to look at a forest. In fact, we're going to look at the birth, growth, destruction, and renewal of a forest. We start off somewhat arbitrarily bottom left, the open patch. For whatever reason, there's an open patch in this forest, equal access to sun and rain. As a result, everything comes into this open patch. The only rule is that you have to be a migrant to make your way into this open patch. You see, this is our first lesson from the forest ecology, is that to discover new opportunities, you have to move. You have to be a migrant. Animals that get territorial, that protect particular areas, don't find new things. Migrants do. And so here we have migrant birds, migrant plants coming into this open patch. There's equal access to sun and rain here. As a result, everything grows. And in the beginning, there's no competition. There's resources for all, and they grow like crazy. We call them weeds, of course, if they appear on our lawn, but that's what weeds are. They are entrepreneurs. In fact, I like to think that the recent dot-com boom was a weedy outbreak in our corporate ecology. Lots of resources, small-scale experimentation, everything growing like crazy, and in the beginning, very little competition. But after a while, the plants start to bump into each other. They can no longer make it on their own, they have to compete. They have to sink deep roots to get to the water first. They have to put up branches and leaves to get to the sun before anybody else. And in short, they have to start to develop scale. They have to get bigger. And so here you see a typical forest succession, starting with the weeds, going through to shrubs, small trees, small bushes, and eventually the forest culminates in the large softwood trees and eventually hardwood trees. We see the same kind of development in all systems. There's increasing competition, which leads to increasing efficiency, leads to increasing size, increasing scale, but at the same time, much less variety. When a forest grows up and you have nothing but trees, they take the sun, they take the rain, they don't allow much to grow underneath them. And it's just the same in the corporate world. When corporations become large, they don't permit much variety to take place, to grow underneath them. And so here's an example of Walmart stores, for instance, starting in 1962 with a 16,000 square foot store in Rogers, Arkansas. You can see that they've grown steadily. In fact, the store size has increased 7 times over the last 41 years. More and more resources being held inside one store. And I'm going to argue that it was Walmart's small scale when they began that gave them such an edge over Sears Roebuck, who owned the discount retail business in the 1960s. The problem was, though, that Sears Roebuck could not make a profit unless their stores were at least 100,000 square foot in size. And when you looked at the map of North America and said, where can I put a store of 100,000 square feet, there was no room. Every good site was taken. But Walmart, with their 16,000 square foot and smaller model, when they looked to see whether they could put a store, there were all kinds of open patches everywhere across the country. And so Walmart began in the backwoods of Rogers, Arkansas, and they had 24 stores in the state of Arkansas before they went outside, which shows you that when you're small scale, you can find lots of opportunities. So that's our second lesson from the forest. You have to be a migrant, and you have to be small scale in order to find opportunities. This is essentially an Eastern view of change. Change is always taking place, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, and whether we detect it depends very much upon our scale, whether we're small scale or large scale. And so here we have 2 processes. The one a creative process, the one a destructive process. But each of them contains within it the seeds of the other. Everything that grows must die, but that creates fuel that can be used for fire. Fire creates the conditions for renewal, in which new growth can come. And so we go round and round in the eco-cycle. This explains the Chinese symbol for crisis. It consists of 2 symbols. The top one means danger, and the bottom one means opportunity. And my Chinese friends tell me that that bottom symbol is a forest and a tree. And so I like to think that the forest metaphor is embedded in the crisis symbol. Of course, Smokey the Bear, who we've grown up with, saying only you can put out forest fires, is thoroughly out of place in this situation. Smokey is not systemic. Smokey doesn't understand complex systems. We don't need to banish him. What we need to do is help him rediscover his twin sister, Flammy. And so here we have Smokey and Flammy in the forest together. Smokey is a manager. He looks after stuff that's growing and he puts out fires. You can see his little fire extinguisher. Flammy is a leader. She wears a hard hat and she carries a drip torch, one of those fire igniting bits of equipment that they use in forests now. Flammy is a catalyst for change. She's continually testing you, saying, are you young and green, or are you old and dead wood, and we need to stop putting resources into you and recycle you? Leaders make that kind of test. And of course we need both. We need the Flammies to test us, and we need the Smokies to protect us and smell smoke and put out fires and all those kinds of good things that you're used to. Flammy and Smokey, leaders and managers. When we start talking about corporations, I'm going to suggest that it's exactly analogous to the forest. We need the two together. And you can see this infinity loop, or eco-cycle as I call it, has got a solid line on the front and a dotted line on the back. And the solid line is the slow processes of growth, because it takes a long time to grow. And the dotted line is the fast processes of destruction, because fire comes very quickly. Fire does its work very quickly. And so we go slowly up on the growth processes and fast back on the destructive processes. But we need them both together to describe a system undergoing change. And to show that, here we have the Bitterroot Fire, Montana, August 6, 2000. It's so hot, the elk are standing in the water to get away from the heat. The same site, 1 year later, the sound of running water, it is time for renewal again. Everything is set for the cycle to begin. Creation and destruction, both essential to sustainable development.